Presenter here. So I'll just, yes, thank you. Our next presenter is going to be Laurie Byro. What we've enjoyed having here today are people who have ties here to our library, and Laurie is probably had one of the longest ties here. Laurie has run our poetry circle here for approximately 20 years. The poetry circle has been anywhere between 4 and 6 times a year. So again, if you haven't seen it, definitely be on the lookout for the poetry circle. Laurie, the next meeting is?
It's November, I think, 18th.
November 18th. So keep in mind.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan, just very top, very seasonal. So yes, but please be on the lookout. Laurie has her is a multi-award winner. She has our awards listed here in our book, and I won't go too much into that. But did want to mention that a few things that Laurie has said, which I think we both were important to say out. She has recently attended workshops by Molly Peacock, which for her, I think, for her, as she said, it's important for her to feel like she's not staying in a safe zone, to get out of the safe zone, to really kind of figure out her art and get to work out there. One of the things that she mentioned that I think is great is she does not like to see herself as in any way as a professional. She sees herself as an amateur in the sense of the word, where the root word for amateur being amor, being the love of doing something. And that's how she would like to see herself, as someone who continues to do what she does for the love of it and not necessarily as a profession. So without any further ado, I will present to you Laurie Byro.
Everybody likes my gondola look, and we were in Venice recently, and I had written a sequence about Peggy Guggenheim, who had a home in Venice, and about I started writing salon poems, which is a whole other thing. I started out writing, like we all do, about our own experiences, and, you know, after a while, every family has its own tragic situations, and people get tired of hearing about them, I think. It brings us together, but at the same time, I think it's more interesting, as Molly Peacock and some others have said about my work, to have high literary gossip and read about the different characters that we know about, like Peggy Guggenheim and Vincent van Gogh and Isadora Duncan, Gertrude Stein. That to me is my fascination, and that's where I end up aiming my work now. I was very fortunate that my husband started painting about 5 years ago, and that's the cover of my latest book, which I think is magnificent. And I was mentioning this to Ricardo that Molly Peacock, I just took out a book from the library about paper. She wrote a book called Paper Garden, which was about a woman at 72 that started cutting up papers so prolifically that they were so botanically correct that you couldn't tell they weren't painted. And she did this with a scissor at 72 years old. So I think we get fascinated by people, and then we write from their perspective. And I've been told I kind of shapeshift and I get into their character pretty well, which is why when I was doing the Bloomsbury group, I didn't really feel so happy, because they're kind of a mixed up group. But I thought I would just read a couple poems from each of the books to give you an idea. The library owns the books, and the books can be obtained on Amazon. The editors now, or the people that publish the books, get the full amount for the book, and that's fine with me because I just want my work out there, you know. Okay, so Luna was the first one, and that was most of the family poem, and I got that the year that my mom was dying of ovarian cancer. And I read a fact that made me very curious about the Luna moth. So, the Luna moth dies because it has no mouth. She learns this the summer her mother dies of the cancer. It starts out like a quickening, an easy pregnancy, her mother tells her, a fluttering like wings. Her mother says that New Year's moths have invaded her mouth, have crawled down to her stomach, their wings furiously weaving her ribs. It's not unpleasant, she says. It can't be dangerous. Afterward, she appears as mossy slices of apple on two wings. How perfect it is that she follows her daughter everywhere, her heart beating all that summer. Her breath is as unnoticed as a morning breeze. She is as fragile as a vine climbing to reach the moon. She is a stem set loose by the sky. The Luna moth alights the daughter's left hip and stays, its antennae searching the warmth of her skin. The mother fans her like a leftover queen, reverent of her hips, the bottom she used to diaper. She reads that butterflies are a sign from the fallen. Her friends say a butterfly could have been a warrior or soldier. This moth is close enough to believe in. Later, she is astonished to discover it has no mouth and will die from not eating. There are no trembling lips, no parched mouth to take in its last truth. In the end, there is no proof that her daughter will walk away from her, shining as brightly as an opalescence, a crescent of light. So I was into Alice in Wonderland. I was really excited by the characters. I also got into The Wizard of Oz, and I got into the poems that D.H. Lawrence, and he was fascinated with a fox. He thought of himself, I think, as a fox. He looked fox-like. So I was writing different poems about those characters. And this one, I'll read this one because this is from Lewis Carroll, The Duchess, and it's kind of in sync with my mother poem. You can kind of see how I'm moving away from my family poems and going out into the world with this. So it's called The Duchess. And remember, the Duchess was the one that I think was the one with the peppers, the pepper. All right, the Duchess. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact, Lewis Carroll. After she died, her hair became water, leaves for mouth, wing for skin. She was ice dripping off hemlock branches in spring. She'd form pools you'd gaze into and see a story, ripples that silence wrens or crows. The earth turned. I became real. I was no longer her sorcerer when we conjured each other's spells, survivors of the day's cast iron tedium. In the Lazy Susan, I found pepper. She hid tins and tins of it, enough for a decade or two. Stories rose like steam off a black skillet moon. I believed the spidery old woman's message in the corner of the barn. Miracle. Salutation. My dad thought piglets were better than babies. They were of use to a farmer, not another mouth to feed. Mom, with her gift of the spoon, left me a lifetime of rituals. Her hip was displaced from all that holding. Crying, she'd hoist me to her waist and stir. She said it's a wonder we both survived. The kittens turned into wise old things. They grinned from ear to ear. She was like that crazy duchess, bouncing me, hoping I'd change into something else to please my father. My mom's faith wasn't invested in a mustard seed. Her faith was written inside a holy cave of words. Today, when I pass hikers talking to myself, I am surrounded by her, white peppery birches in the fall when we see one another, red paprika leaves. And that's from that one. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not sure what came out first, but I think I went into Gertrude Stein. I became fascinated with Gertrude Stein.